All right, recording. So we are starting React, which is the sort of main topic for test 2. So we've done like the little, bridge topics of SVG and what I call neighbors. But now we're ready to start React, which is the main topic for test 2. And what else? Oh, 2 sort of announcements from Professor McCooey. The first one is about the UPE. This is like the Computer Science Technology Honor Society. So if your GPA, I don't know if it's overall or major or both or something, but there's some criteria. And if you meet that criteria, then you can get inducted into this technology honor society. There's like an induction ceremony, and it's something you can put on the resume, wear a special cord at graduation. It's an honor. So if you've received that email from Professor McCooey and you're interested in that, then respond to her. That was McCooey announcement 1. McCooey announcement 2 was that she's found this micro internship company. And so you can find yourself some like small scale projects that you can work on and produce some things, earn some money, gain some experience, find some things that you can put on the resume, etc. So, all right. So if you're interested in the micro internships or the UPE Honor Society, then get in touch with Professor McCooey. All right. I have graded, I graded the first half of the test for, I think, everybody at least who took it on time. And I am maybe halfway through the second set of tests. Okay. So that's coming. Hopefully I'll find more time this week. Certainly I'll find time next week since it's break. Okay. Any questions before I start my React demos? No. Okay. So in React, this is a very exciting React page. It just has sort of headers. But let's see what it looks like in code. Let me do, I'll look at it in Visual Studio Code. I'll open the folder to downloads. React intro, there it is in downloads. And I'll open it in live server, and that's all it does, is it has some headers and such. All right, so how did we do this thing? Okay. So let me kill all these. All right, I'll come back to the style in a minute. So we've done some things like this, like when I did radio buttons, when I did checkboxes, I would do like 3 versions. I would do version 1 where we had the radio buttons on the page and I did like an on click. And then maybe in the second version, I'd add an event listener. And then in version 3, the radio buttons weren't on the page to begin with, and we added them dynamically. And so React is an awful lot like that. So React is, there's going to be not much on the page in terms of HTML. And then we're going to be using JavaScript with this React library. And then that is going to generate things for us. So here, this is all script. And here is the extent of the page. So there's a header that says React demo page. There's a paragraph that says yada, yada, yada. And then there are 3 empty divs. So here's the header, here's the paragraph, and then everything after this was generated dynamically by React. Okay. So if you liked that third version of everything, you'll like React. If you didn't like that third version of everything, then you know, that's the way React is, so you better get used to it. Okay, so that's what we have HTML wise. We have some empty divs, and then things are going to be placed in them. Here is some style. I have a body, I defined a font, a color. I have a class. This is the styling of a class called dot container. And that is that violet background. And then I have something called sum underscore ID. So a dot in CSS refers to styling a class, and a hashtag or pound refers to when you're styling something based on its ID. So the lighter violet, the blue violet is a class styling. The darker violet is a ID. So this was based on ID, and this was based on class. Okay, so that's the styling. Okay. Now, before we get down into the script uses, there are some scripts up here. And these are the React scripts, or the React sort of, I usually call it a library. Maybe it's, there are other similar words. Okay, but this connection to the code is known as a CDN, a content delivery network. So you can download these files and put them next to your code, or you can refer to them up on the internet. And I usually do the connector them up on the internet version, which is called the CDN, but it is possible for you to download these. This is a development version. There is, if you're designing a page and you're ready to use it in production, if it's ready to go out to the world, then you wouldn't use this CDN, but you'd use a different CDN. That CDN, the code would be what we call minified, that it would be extremely hard to read, but very compact and sort of smaller files to be sent over the internet. Okay, so you may get not error messages, but warning messages. So if you bring up your console and it's saying, oh, you're using a development, you'll just say, yes, of course I know. Everything we do in this class is development. We're not making anything ready for production. So development is good enough for us. But the page, if you look in the console, is going to give you a warning and say, you're using development stuff. Okay. And there are two things here, the React and then the React DOM. And DOM stands for Document Object Model. And so that is all of our elements and things like that, the things that you're going to see on the page. So there's code about how things work. and then there's code for more about how things appear and what the elements are, and how things appear and what the elements are. That's the sort of document object model, the DOM part of it. So there are two CDNs. This is like a fairly recent version of it, 17. I updated from the last time I taught this course when it was 16. You just have to make sure that like if I have a 16 and you have a 17, in that change, something that I was using might have changed or something like that. So far, so good. I changed from 16 to 17 and my code works. But that's not always the case. So you have to be, if you're copying one of my examples and something's not working, one thing to see is to see if we have the same CDN. And I will try to point out if I'm not using 17, if I have to revert back to 16 to make something work, I'll try to let you know. Okay, but so those are not code we write, but code that we use, the CDNs. Okay. All right, and now finally our code that we write. Okay, so here we are in script. We are writing a class. Our class uses somebody else's class, so our class extends the React class. So there's a React. The React has a component. The component is something that you see. And so we're writing something. So they have a component, React has a component class, and then we're going to use it and add more to it. So there is a required class when you are extending somebody else's class. There are things that you can do and things that you have to do. And render is something that you have to do. So you have to say, you have to have a render and say what it is that you want to see. And we're saying that we want to make an element, that it's an H1 element. The second part, so this is what type of element we're making, an H1. What attributes are we going to have? We're going to keep it simple to begin with, no attributes, null. And then like the inner HTML, if you will. So you've seen something like this, like when we were creating dynamically the radio buttons and the check boxes, we had like create element and set attribute and things like that. So this is just a compact version of that. Create an element, it's an H1 with no attributes, and here's the inner HTML. Version 2 is I'm going to bring you in some attributes. So again, we are extending the React component. We need to write a render. We are returning a React element. This time it's an H2, so it's a somewhat smaller header. I'm giving it an ID. So this time I'm giving it an attribute. The attribute looks like JSON, right? Curly brackets, and inside the curly brackets, name value pairs. So the name of this property is ID, and its value is sum underscore ID. And so you could imagine there being more attributes, but in this simple case, there's one attribute. And then here's the inner HTML. Now, this is just a class. You know that when you have a class, that doesn't mean anything until you sort of make an object of the class, so we're expecting something later that is actually going to use these classes. Okay. And here's version 3, hello 3. It also extends a React component. We are using the render. We have to do the render. And this time I'm going to make a container, which is a div. I'm going to give the div a class container. Now I'm working in JavaScript, in React in particular, in React, JavaScript, and React. But I'm making HTML. And JavaScript has something called a class, but HTML has a property called class, and we use that to style something. And so we needed to make a distinguish. We needed to distinguish between the JavaScript class, and right now we're in JavaScript. And so JavaScript has a keyword class, and HTML has a keyword class, and we needed to make some distinction. So instead of saying class, we said class name. That's the distinction we make here. And there are a couple more things like that. One thing I can think of off the top of my head is for. You know that a label has a for property to make the label work maybe in conjunction with a radio button or a checkbox. But you also know that in JavaScript, for is a way to loop over things. So that's another one of those key words that is shared by HTML and JavaScript. And so when we're in React, we're going to have to come up with another word for. Okay. So, but right now we needed another word for class, and it was class name. Okay. So those are the classes. We're extending React's class, React's component class. But those are the classes. Now we need sort of the objects. We need to actually put something on the page. So here we're using React DOM, and we're saying make hello, our hello one. And where are we going to put it? We're going to put it in div target 1. And make hello 2 and put it in div target 2, and make hello 3 and put it in div target 3. And it doesn't do anything, this page, but the JavaScript is that all this stuff below this, we had a paragraph, we had a header and a paragraph that was normal HTML. Everything below that was generated dynamically using JavaScript and React. Any questions so far? Okay. So now example 2. Okay, so we're going to add even more stuff. I didn't want that. I want to look at it in. So in open folder, in downloads, show me the Explorer, add JSX. Okay. So this is going to be the same. There it is. It does the same thing. Here was hello. Here was this new one. Okay. So this style is the same. So I'm not going to talk about style. The HTML is, okay, now I have 2 paragraphs. And I have div target 1, div target 2, div target 3. So the HTML, other than the fact that I'm doing some more blah, blah here because I'm explaining what's going on to the people who aren't listening to me, that they can read it for themselves. Okay. So, but what else is different in the JavaScript and the React? In line 12 here, we have another CDN. We have a CDN to Babel. And that's, so right now, sorry, well, in the previous version, what did we have? We had JavaScript, in particular this React library, helping us write some HTML. What Babel's going to do is allow us to write HTML that looks more like HTML to us. We're not going to write the HTML in the HTML page. We're going to write the HTML within JavaScript, but we're going to be allowed to make it look a little more HTML-like. That's the purpose of Babel. Now, there are people who don't like Babel. I don't know. I kind of like it, but some people don't like it. They were happy with that, what we saw previously. They think in code, and so that made them happy, and now this makes them sad, but other people use this, so there we go. So here's the new version with Babel of these classes. Here's an important thing. Usually our scripts just said script. Sometimes my scripts used to say JavaScript. If I really had an old script, I might have that the type of script was JavaScript, which is understood, so you don't need it unless you're doing something else. We are doing something else. We're not just doing plain old JavaScript. We're doing Babel. Okay. Here's the first header, hello 1, with Babel. So I write it. I say, I'm in JavaScript. I have a class. I'm doing a render. I'm doing a return. That's all very JavaScripty. But here's the thing I'm returning, h1 tags with a HTML, with the inner HTML, I am a dynamic header. So that's what Babel gave us. Babel gave us the ability to, within JavaScript that's writing HTML, write things that look more like HTML. Okay. So here is hello 2. All I did in hello 2 was add an attribute. Well, if I'm writing something that's more HTML-like, I could just write the HTML. So here's my h2 tag and give it the ID property. Version 3, I had a div, and then in the div, I had a head. I should tell you that you'll say, well, why do you want that div? And we will often put the things that we are returning in React inside divs because there can only be one element. A React component sends back one, I'll call it parent. We just played all that parent-child game last week. It wasn't completely absurd for me to be talking about parents and children before React, because you cannot send two siblings back in React. You can only send at the highest level in React. When you are sending back a component, you can send back a single, it has to be an only child. That only child can have many children. So I can, right now I have a header in here, I could put another header and another header and another header, but I can only send like one parent. The highest level of thing has got to be a single thing. So there will often be, we'll have a set of things we want to send back, and then we'll put them in some kind of container, usually a div. Okay. So here is hello 3. I'm sending back a div. Now I'm writing something because of Babel that looks more like HTML, but I'm still in this weird no man's land of half HTML, half JavaScript. And so class, the name class has a JavaScript meaning. And so even though right here we're writing something that's very HTML-like, the name class is is sectioned off and is understood by JavaScript. So we did have to keep that change to the name, class name for our HTML. Okay, down here, we are writing the hellos. I think that's an old way to do it. We're writing the hellos and we're sending them to the targets. Any questions? Okay. Now, again, in the first test, you had your choice. You could hard code the HTML, you could load things dynamically, you could put it all in one file, you could have separate files. I didn't care so long as you got the job done. When it comes to the React part of test 2, you must use React. So the points will, the grading of the test will be set up for you to use React. And if you don't do React, then you're not going to do well on the test. Questions? No. All right. So 3. So I want to show how to, so we're writing a class, we're using React, we're extending a React class to write an HTML element. And the idea of, one of the ideas of a class is to be able to, either a function or a class, all those sort of related ideas in computer science. One of the main ideas is to have reuse, to be able to use things again. So now let's say I want a bunch of radio buttons, but I don't want them to all be the same. I want them to represent different choices. So this set of radio, I'm going to make a set of radio buttons just as an excuse to have a set of things that are similar, but not exactly the same. So how do I use a class to make a set of objects that are similar, but not exactly the same? And the set of radio buttons is not going to do anything. It's not the purpose. I'm going to come back to radio buttons and make them useful and click them and understand which choice the user made. That's not the purpose. So this is not useful as a set of radio buttons at this stage, but it's more just the dynamic part of let's use a class that makes radio buttons, but each one's slightly different. And how do we get the slightly different part when we're using a class? Okay. So here are the make radio. All right, so what do I have? What happens here? I have a set of radio buttons. I click them. I have some labels and some radio buttons. I have some styling for which radio button is chosen. And that's it. It doesn't do anything. Okay, what do I have? I have the CDN to React. I have the CDN to React DOM. I have the CDN to the Babel. I have one div. I'm going to throw everything into this one div. Here is my React class for a radio button. I'm going to have a radio button, which is an input, and I'm going to have a label. And that's two things. The radio button and the label are siblings. And so I put them in a div because React components want to send back just one thing at the highest level, one thing. Okay, that's what I just told you a minute ago, that occurs a lot, and here it is occurring. Okay, so I'm extending the React component. I'm calling it my radio. I'm responsible for the render method. What am I going to return? I'm going to return a div. so that I'm returning a single thing. That single thing may contain many little subcomponents, but overall I'm sending back one container. It has an input of the radio type. It's going to have a value. The value is what you send behind the scenes. And I'm going to have something properties, and properties are going to have a value. So this isn't quite done. It's not like I'm sending you small, because if I send you the value small, then that's good for the small radio button, but it's no good for the medium radio button. So this is me making it, giving it sort of arguments and properties and making it more generalizable. So I have an input of the type radio. The value of the radio button is going to be related to the props, the properties. The name, remember, the name of the radio buttons is going to be what groups them together and allows you to choose one, at most one of the choices. That is also going to be some property. And here it is, it's going to be the group name property. There's going to be an ID. I'm going to have 4 radio buttons. When I'm done, all those radio buttons must have different IDs. So again, it's some property. This time it's the ID property. I'm going to have a val property. I'm going to have an ID property. I'm going to have a text property. After I have the input, which is a radio button, I have the label. The radio button, the label and the radio button work as a team, provided the 4 property of the label matches the ID property of the input. But I'm not really in HTML. I'm using Babel, so it looks like HTML, but I'm not really in HTML. And so 4 would be the JavaScript 4, would think I was starting a for loop, a loop or iteration loop. And so I have to say HTML 4. And then I also give that the ID of props, so that the ID of the input and the ID of the 4, these 2 things match and they'll work together. Here's my open label, here's my closed label. I'm going to put the text of props between the open label and the closed label. That's what the user will see. Okay, so that's my class. And now here is me using objects of that class. So I'm going to have a radio. It's going to have a val of S, a group name of size, an ID of 0, and a text of small. I'm going to have another radio button with a val of M and a group name of size and an ID of 1 and a text of medium, and so on. So this allows me, again, I'm sending back something in React. React only wants me to send one thing. And so I put them all in a div. So I put my set of radio buttons in a div, so there's only one thing. Within my radio button class, I'm sending you an input and a label. So I put them in a div so that they're a single thing. So it's like divs within divs within divs. That's the way these things often end up. And we saw what it did. It made a set of radio buttons that we didn't say function in that you could choose one and only one thing, but they didn't do anything beyond that. There's no, like, let me get the user's answer from this. That's coming later. Questions? No. Okay, next, last thing, or sort of next to the last thing for the day. We'll finally have some kind of interaction. I'm going to have my famous sort of opening exercise, either a wage calculator or a restaurant calculator. I'm doing the wage so that you'll do the restaurant. So here's the wage calculator. What does it do? It says, how many hours did you work? Or what was your wage? I make 16 an hour. How many hours did I work? I worked 50 hours this week. And then, so I made $880. Okay. All right, so there's some style, as I often say, not much. There's a body, a color, a background color, a color. I have a label. I have an input of the number type. I have an input of the button type. So that's my style. I have my CDNs. I have my CDN to React. I have my CDN to React DOM. I have my CDN to Babel. Okay. I do not have these things downloaded. If you are going to say, I don't like CDNs, I like to work offline. That's the one thing you can't do with a CDN is work offline because you're connecting to the internet to get that code. If you're that type, if you want to be, oh, I need to be able to work offline and I'm going to work with this, I'm going to download them. Then when you send me your work, you must send me those files, zipped up, of course. But you must send me, I don't have those files. I work with the CDN. You don't work with the CDN, that's acceptable, but you have to send me the files. Okay. Now this, as opposed to everything that came before, this React page has interaction. The user could click a button and do a calculation and determine a salary. So we have interactivity. We are going to also have a state. So the state is going to be like, what's the value of the wage? And what's the value of the hours? Okay. There's the script. And again, this is the idea in React is there's almost nothing in HTML except some container and everything, all those buttons and places to enter the wage, that's all generated dynamically. So all it is right now in pure code is an empty div, and then we generate stuff. Okay, so here is, we're going to extend, again, we're in Babel. So we can write some of our React will look like HTML. That's what Babel gives us. I'm extending the React component. I'm calling it my wage calc. There is a convention where the name of a class starts with a capital letter. And I think React follows that standard. So if your class doesn't start with a capital letter, you're going to be scratching your head trying to find that error for hours. So just make sure that your class name start with a capital letter, and it's going to save you a lot of problems. Okay. So here's the constructor for the class, and we're going to establish some initial properties. So I'm going to say, so super is a thing when you extend a class. So we're going to say, have all the regular stuff, and here's a little bit more. So have all the regular React component stuff, and then here's a little bit more. I'm going to have a result. My initial result is going to be a bunch of dashes. I'm going to have a wage, which is going to start off at 8. I'm going to have hours, which start off at 40. You'll note the JSON notation, right? Except the names aren't in quotes. This is almost, if this were JSON that was in some file, then the word result would be in quotes and the word wage would be in quotes and the word hour would be in quote. But otherwise, this is recognizable to you as JSON. A set of properties and a set of values separated by commas, all in curly brackets. Okay. Very JSON-y. We like it. We know JSON. We love JSON. Okay. So that is the constructor and the super. What else do we have? So we have wages. I'm still in the constructor. No, I'm not still in the constructor. I'm out of the constructor, sorry. Here is a function, a method for setting the wage. So when the user interacts with the box, which is for the wage, I am establishing the wage as the new value. So E target values, whatever they wrote in the wage box, and I make it the wage. So I'm setting the state. I'm changing the wage property to whatever they entered in the box, and I'm clearing out the results. They may have done some calculation. They've done some calculation. They interact with the wage box. Now the wage is 18. And the result is dash, dash, dash. That's because I was just in this method. I set the wage to whatever in the E target value, which is what sent me here. And I set the result equal to dash, dash, dash. Same thing for hours. So let me do the calculation again. If I change the hours, it changed the hour variable to 49, and it set the result to a bunch of dashes. That's what this method did here. I still haven't shown you how it connects to the interface, but I've shown you that there's a method, and I've shown you the result of the method. Here's my calculate method. I have a variable I'm calling salary. I'm saying that if the hours, so in my state, I had a property hours. If it's more than 40, I'm going to say 40 hours times the wage plus the number of hours minus 40 times the wage times 1.5. So you're getting overtime. Otherwise, the salary is the wage times the hours. But I don't have just wage times hours. I have a state. I'm in an object of a class, so I'm using the keyword this. This has a thing called state. State has some sub-properties like wage and hours and result. Okay, so then I set, once I figured out the salary, I add a $sign and I make the salary to fixed, and then I set the state of result to the salary. So that's going to be when I click the button. Finally, I'm down to render. Render's the thing I have to do, and render's the thing where you'll see the HTML. This was all, above that, this was all action. Here's an overall div. I keep telling you that I can only send back one thing. So if I have more than one thing, I put it all in one div. So that's my one div. And then I have some subdivs. Here's my label for wage, and I have an input and some the number type. When it changes in any way, I call that set wage function. And the value of this input, the value of an input is what's typed into it, starts off as wage. So if I change it, I call set wage, but when I start off, it's set equal to wage, and that was 8. I think I had it to start off with. Here's my label for hours. It's an input of the number type. When I change it, I call set hours, and it's connected, its values connected to this, which is a class, or an object of the class. It has a state and it has an hours property. So this originally started off at 40. Down here is my button. Input of the button type, the values, what the button says, calculate the salary for the week. And then the on click goes to this calc salary. So again, I'm working with a class. So I have this keyword this, and I have a method called calculate salary. I have one last div. It's got an ID of div result, and the inner HTML is this.state.result. So I'm always showing you a result. And when I don't have a result to show you, I have to make the result the dash, 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 so that you see that I'm not, I have it, there will be an answer, but I don't have it yet. All that's for naught if you don't put it on the page. You can write beautiful, beautiful, beautiful React and open up the page and there will be nothing if you don't do this last step. Take my wage calculator and put it into the div wage calculate container. Questions? Okay, you have to do something like that. You don't need the if. You're going to do a restaurant calculator. You're going to enter, your user's going to enter the bill and a percentage, and then calculate the tip and maybe the total. The last thing I want to show you is just divide this stuff up. That, you know, if you're like the best, most sophisticated coder, then you will separate, and I often am not, and I admit that. But if you're really into this and sophisticated, then you separate your HTML from your JavaScript from your CSS. So I'm just going to show a version where I have at least some separation. I think I posted it. We'll see. Yeah, so it's just the wage calculator again, but with some separation. All right, now what do I want? So it was wage calculator 2, zip. Did I unzip it? I don't know if I unzipped it. Now I've definitely unzipped it. Oh, there it is as a folder. Okay. So there's the CSS just pulled out as a CSS file. Here's the HTML. I kept my scripts in the HTML. There's a way to pull them out into the JavaScript, but I didn't do that. So here's my normal script tags. Here's my link to the CSS. Here's the div where I'm going to put stuff. And here is my script relating to my React. And remember that it's of type Babel. And then here is my JavaScript code pulled out. Here is the React class. And here's the putting it on the page. Okay, so all that is just what we talked about, but separated into the 3 parts. What you have to do, turn my wage calculator into a restaurant calculator. So you're going to use React and Babel. If you don't want to use Babel, you don't have to, but you know, my example uses Babel. You're going to have 2 inputs, 2 number inputs, a button, So 2 number inputs, a button, and then a place for the result. So it's going to look an awful lot like what I just had. And then your HTML will be pretty much empty, and React is going to supply everything. If you're not doing that, you're not doing React. And then when the user enters the restaurant bill and the tip percentage and clicks the button, then you'll calculate the sum, the tip and the bill, the total. So they'll give you the bill, you'll give them the tip, and also the bill plus the tip. And make sure you're doing numbers and adding and not concatenating. And it's money, so 2 decimal places, yada, yada. Any questions? No. I'll stop recording. Let me